So if it's okay, I'll just turn it over to you right now. Yeah?
All right. That's fine.
That you're a member of budget thing. So
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 4th meeting of the Abington Finance Committee. Tonight we are continuing our series of meetings with department heads going over the fiscal year 19 budget for the town. Tonight we have the school department with us, and we have a large gallery of folks, much larger than our usual empty gallery of folks, who are here to view the discussion of the school budget. So we have with us School Superintendent Peter Schaefer and School Committee Member Chris Coyle. Welcome.
I'm sorry, what?
Coyle.
Thank you.
We also have our town manager here hiding in the back. And I think we can get right to it.
Great.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Well, I want to thank both the chair and the committee for giving us the opportunity to talk about the school budget. So I'm going to say this a couple of times through the presentation. My goal here is to answer all of your questions, and I can provide an overview and we can walk through. But at the end of this, I'll probably repeat this. You know where I work. There's no time limit on questions. I want your questions. I want to make sure that we answer all those questions. I respect the job that you all do for the community. All the long hours you put into looking at budgets, for all the money that you get for the job that you're doing. And just so that everybody's aware on cable, I know you get $0 for this, but you spend a lot of time at it. So Felicia Michella will be joining us. We had a building committee meeting just prior to this. She's wrapping that up and she'll be over. So I also just want to take a moment to thank the people here at the town hall. Rick LaFond, Dory Jameson, Sue Moquin, Jack Bistorino, and Sonia Hodge. We've been meeting with them throughout the budget process. It's been a nice collaborative group effort. It's one that we've been able to engage in with this leadership team at the town hall since Rick has been here, and we just appreciate that. Members of our Budget and Finance Subcommittee are both Mike Kurowski. I want to thank him for his help, and then also I want to recognize Chris Coyle and all of his hard work, and actually turn it over to Chris at this point to provide you some information.
So my information, so when I ran last year, when I won for school committee, I talked a lot about full-day kindergarten. I know you're aware of that idea coming up. I have some information on that I just wanted to kind of give you guys to start off with, and then answer any questions we have. Matt, I know you've maybe seen some of this based on conversations and emails, so it just
some of it will be repetitive for members of the committee, as the town manager has provided some of it to us. Okay. But I know that a lot of people here in the audience and a lot of people listening at home are very invested in this issue. So okay, it'll be good to have as much information as you can provide.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, the first off, it's something that I know in talking with Peter, he's wanted to do for a while. The building of the new school now gives us the space and the resources to try to go forward with it. Just some things from across I'm going to go with across the state. 83% of the districts in the state currently offer free all-day kindergarten. Covers 81% of the communities. 285 of the communities in the state offer it for free. Of the students that go to kindergarten in the state, 95% of them go full day. In Abington, that number is only about 67%. When I talk to people, the biggest reason is it's the cost. So it's tough to hear when certain kids are getting less, I don't want to say less of an education, but less time for an education because they can't afford it. I know it can take at least a year, probably up to 2 years for those kids to eventually catch up. If you're only there 2.5 hours a day as opposed to close to 6 for a whole year, it's going to take you some time until you're able to catch up where you want to go. Some other neighboring communities that I know that have it: Rockland, East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Holbrook. Marshfield's also asking for it in their upcoming budget in their town. We see a lot of families starting to move into Abington, a lot of developments being built. I think it's a great thing to offer. Families see this, it's a place they want to come to raise their children. I know that the plan right now is to try to use money in free cash for it. I know what the free cash was at in February. I know it's less now because of storms, so I understand all that does come into play. I know there's other expenses that have been less because of the school being built, such as the South Shore Voc expenses are less than they were now. So hopefully all those things can be considered. Just some things I wanted to throw out there, and I can answer any questions that I do know, or I can look to get the answers if I don't. So that's kind of what I have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you say that 67% of the kids go full day now and they pay for it?
So I don't know if they pay for it. So I know if they don't have an IEP that covers it, that yes, they would have to pay tuition to go full day.
So some of the kids do go full day now?
67, yeah, 2/3 of the town, 2/3 of the students in kindergarten are going full day, and they're paying for it.
Oh, I thought they were all half day.
No, they pay.
And they pay for it.
They pay about
They do,
$3,000 for the other half of the program.
Really?
Yeah.
$3,000 a year
Yes.
per student? Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what I've given to each member is what you may have seen in January. It's our budget packet. I put it at everybody's seat, so you have it. So this is an extensive document. I am not a spare you having to go through this with me page by page by page, but what I do want to do is just highlight what's in here for you, because, again, I want to answer your questions, and the backup for what I'm going to say to you is in this document, and I want to make sure you just know where it is. So it's a reference tool for you.
And just quickly, as you're starting, we're welcoming Felicia
Thank you.
Moschella to the table, the Assistant Superintendent.
So,
Who know who just walked.
Thanks.
On camera,
I was at
who's
building
back, they
committee,
can
so-
say yes, Peter did introduce that you were
were working.
coming over here, so I just wanted to make sure that people watching knew.
you weren't at the Great Chow, you were working.
I was.
No one's at the Great Job.
So the first is just my overview of the budget process. Then there's the calendar of how things play out. There's a budget history that goes back to FY10 through 18 in terms of the school department's budgets, and then it's broken down by salaries and other expenses, operating costs. Then there's a page that provides enrollment data for you in the school system. Then there's a page that talks about the historical staffing in the school department on page 5. Page 6 shows by major category the percentages that are apportioned to the different functions in the school system. Page 7 is, I'm going to replace this page. It's the major increase page by category. I'm going to give you, actually, you already have another copy of that. I'm going to review that with you tonight. Then there is a staffing request page on page 8. This page includes positions that we are no longer requesting at this time, because we take these requests and consider the needs of the entire district, and then as we move towards the budget process, we have to pare it down because we understand that Abington doesn't have unlimited resources. But I'll talk about those positions that we are considering. Then there's a page on textbooks for both the secondary and then one for the elementary. And then there is a line-by-line, by school, budget spreadsheet for you. And again, I just wanted to identify the components and the backup that we have for the information that we're providing for you tonight, should you want to use it as a resource. So the page that I thought it would probably be best to spend the majority of our time on, and I'll start on it and then I'll back it up with another page and then go back to it, is the major increase page. It's the page that is dated 3/9/18. Proposed increases by major category from the FY18 school department budget to the FY 2019 school department budget by major category. So this breaks down the school department by major function. We have a salary account, obviously. Basically, the majority of our money goes to pay people to teach the over 2,000 kids in the system. So the salary account, we anticipate the major increase will be $576,209. That will enable us to meet our contractual obligations with all employees in the school system, and an enablement for the ongoing negotiations with the different groups we have in the school department. There's a retirement offset. We know we have 5 teachers and 1 administrative assistant who are retiring. We'll be able to replace those positions at a smaller dollar value because there'll be people that'll be newer and starting their careers. So that will decrease our budget by $134,600. The new positions to the district that we're trying to find a way to fund. Let me start with the special education position. I'll take them out of order. You see here there's an abbreviation. Technology, 0.5, that's a half of an English teacher, and then there's a special education SPED note there. So currently at the middle school, we have a gap in service for children with special needs. So we have a program that starts at the early elementary level and goes all the way through up until grade 5. We do not have this program in grade 5. Those students are graduating and going to grade 5. And then we have the program, we already have it in place at the high school level. So we need to fill that gap with staffing. So, and you'll hear me say this a couple of times, not only is it more affordable to educate our children in our district, it is also better for our children, which is the most important thing, to educate them in our district. They get a better environment when they're with the rest of the students that all function at different levels, if they're surrounded by what a whole school provides and those students. That's healthier for them, it's a better environment for them, it provides a better education for them. And when they go to a school that has a concentration of students with their particular disability, to provide them service, because for some reason their disabilities are so great that we can't meet them in our settings, it's more expensive for the town of Abington. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we continue on. But that's why that's an important position for us. And so one of the things we did in earlier renditions is our special education budget was higher. We took money out of that special education budget to earmark it for that position, because that's just something we absolutely have to have for the 2 reasons I explained to you. It's better for the kids and it's more affordable for Abington and the district. So one of the things that's happened is, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, we should be receiving quite a bit more reimbursement from the state of Massachusetts in Chapter 70 money for 2 reasons. One is, if we add full-day kindergarten, we are going to get more money in the following year from the state of Massachusetts. The other thing that's happening is your school system has added about 110 students this last year alone. The majority of those students are at Abington High School. This half-time English teacher would help with those numbers. And so that's an important thing for us. The building project that's already been funded with the majority of the funding from the state, and then a lot of money from local tax revenue, already has funded a computer, a one-to-one initiative. This technology person would be able to best support that program and make sure that we maximize the dollars we're spending, one-time dollars, on laptops. So it's 1,200 laptops?
1,100.
1,100 laptops. And so, we have 2,000 students. There are students at the elementary level that will be increasing their use of technology. Students at the secondary level increasing their use of technology. And then we have 180 teachers, about 200 teachers. And so all of these people using all of this technology requires, and the cameras that we have in the new building and the phones requires quite a bit of work We have a technology staff of 2 people to provide service for all of these things. And then what this person would be is an integrationist to help make sure that in the classrooms, the use of the laptops is maximized. Because when you've got a classroom full of students using laptops, learning really, it doesn't completely change, but it changes tremendously. And so those are those positions. Programs with other districts. What I want to refer you to is the page that says Abington Public Schools Special Education Budget Presentation. And I just want to talk a little bit about special education in Massachusetts because this is not an Abington phenomenon. This is a Massachusetts thing. And so all communities struggle with the costs of special education. So one of the things, as I described earlier, is that this person that we add to the middle school builds a program in our school system. As we build programs in our school systems for special education, I already described why that's better. Better for the students and more affordable. We've done that, I want to say, over the last 5 or 6 years. We have built quite a bit. And our general ed teachers, too, are shouldering students with disabilities, and they're doing an amazing job meeting their needs. But what makes the special education budget so complex is that it's the law around the entitlements that are provided require us to provide services for these students. We need to provide them a free and appropriate public education, and they have the same right to full access to the curriculum that every student has, and so they can't be discriminated against based on their disability, meaning, you know, they can't be cut out of major components of the curriculum. They deserve and have access to everything, and so we have to build supports in the system, ways to help them so they can get that information. And so that law requires that we provide those services, and what can happen is, at any given time, you can have a family move into move into Abington that we didn't anticipate. So, for example, we have a placement in the Abington Public Schools for one child who we will sadly probably receive because their medical conditions are so complex, and that one placement costs us over $400,000.
A year?
Yes. And that is similar to what other communities wrestle with special education. Now, that's the biggest number I can give you. That's the high end.
Because they're sent out.
Because they're sent out of the district because of their medical needs. And so today, you know, we have a special education increase in this budget of $91,958. Because what we do is we track all of those students and we try to meet their needs, and then we have to anticipate in the following year which students we think we will not meet their needs and which ones we will. And so the special education budget continues to change. It changes all of the time depending on the individual needs of the students and then who could be moving in or out of your district. A child who's costing, I'm going to make up a number, $200,000. Their family could move out of Abington, and that would take $200,000 out of our budget in the following year. So that's how fluid that special education budget can be, and I think it's important that members of the Finance Committee know that and understand that, and know that that's not an Abington thing. That's a Massachusetts thing. That's the law in Massachusetts until they age out, and then they're picked up probably by insurance companies more and other agencies. But right now, through school age through the age of 22, it's the responsibility of the school system, and because it's the responsibility of the school system in Massachusetts, it falls on the backs of the town to support. So what's happened, and the reason that special education costs go up higher than the cost of living, higher than annual budgets, is because advances in medicine have been so profoundly good that these children are surviving. they're medically more able to make it, and years ago, they would not survive. And so they require, though, continued deep medical needs and challenges and services. And so people are always looking at the sped budget and how much it bounces around or how much it may be increasing. And I think at its foundation, just people need to understand that that's why that budget fluctuates so much. So, I mean, my quarrel isn't that these students get these services. I want them to get these services. It's that it shouldn't fall on the backs of the school system and the town. It should be another, maybe a medical vehicle by which to take care of these things. That's not the way it is in Massachusetts. So I'll jump to the bottom of this page and maybe hit another point before I leave it, though. So there's at the bottom of the document, the financial challenges are not caused by the district policies and practices, but rather medical, economic, and social factors that are exacerbated by the lack of adequate funding by the federal government. The federal government enacted the Individuals with Disabilities Act and committed to funding 40%, but they only fund 7% of this through the grants that we apply for. And so it's left for state and local government to pick up the rest of those bills. So I want to spend a little bit of time on that. The other thing I want to talk about is circuit breaker, because circuit breaker is a state account that does provide us some relief. So let me because we're going to talk about circuit breaker next on our budget sheet.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
They committed just to fund 40%, they've only done 7%.
Correct.
Around the entire state or just Abington?
Country.
The country.
So, and they're, obviously there's no way to like hold them to that, or?
Everybody, that's a great question. That's why people are continually pushing them and suing the government for these dollars, and it hasn't gotten anywhere yet.
Yeah, okay.
But you're right.
So they enacted something and then said they were gonna do that and then,
Didn't fund it.
It's an
Peter,
unfunded
Do you
mandate.
know how long that has specifically been in place? It's been a long time.
1970 something?
1970.
they've never funded.
They've never fully funded it. It's
State does the same thing.
it's IDEA. So, I mean,
And it's not only special education
Yeah.
that the government does that with.
So, but what the state does is the state provides us some relief in terms of something called circuit breaker, and I want to just describe that to you, because that's the next thing on the budget. So, when we send the student, let's call it a $100,000 placement out of the district, we own the first $45,000 of that cost, that annual cost. And then
100%.
100% of that $45,000. And then for every dollar above that $45,000, the state reimburses us at some rate, depending on how much money the state has that year. So Felicia has anticipated that circuit breaker estimate is 65%. So for those students that we have out of the district, including the poor kiddo that is over $400,000 placement, we'll pay the first $45,000, and then $45,001, that every dollar above that, they will reimburse us Felicia is anticipating they'll reimburse us at 65 cents on the dollar for those dollars up to that $400,000 placement. So that provides us tremendous relief. So when you hear people talking about circuit breaker, that's what that does. But you get that money in the following year after you've spent it. So again, it's very important for us to try to anticipate something that we can't be 100% certain about in terms of our budgeting.
You don't get that, we don't get the percentage though until much further in the budget process either, so
Right.
you have to plan.
Correct.
You have to plan your budget on what you're anticipating, and then oftentimes,
Right. And that's another mandate that, law that was, circuit breaker was to be reimbursed at 75%. And you can see the history since 2015, there's been 1 year that it's been 75%.
Just under. Oh, yeah, 1 year,
No,
sorry.
1 year
So,
was
yep.
75. And there's actually legislation they were talking about today with the supplemental budget for this year to bring it up from 65%. But that hasn't been voted.
And who funds that after the 45?
State
State
government.
The state does it after the,
So the federal government provides approximately 7% towards special education. The state then helps out the municipalities in providing money through this circuit breaker, saying the town takes on the first
yeah.
45,000.
Yeah.
Is that per student?
Yep.
45,000 per student. Above that, the state reimburses. So it's a combination of all three levels of government that are funding the special education budget.
I mean, is that the problem? Probably.
Part of it.
Yeah.
Part of it is both federal and state mandates that they're not funding at what they
Yeah.
passed their funding to be.
And some
set
of it
at,
can
and
be-
Part of it is that it's a cost that's put on the school system that is not necessarily for services provided by the school system, which makes it a difficult thing to calculate and project and track and take care of.
Like you may have a student that's being transported that requires a nurse during transport, and so that has to be paid for. And it
By the
comes
school department.
Out of the school
Yes.
department's budget to pay for that nurse. So
Or-
it's not an
And-
educational
and for
cost, but for that
transport.
child to receive an education, if they have a medical condition that requires them to have a nurse while their van is taking them to the out-of-district placement, then that's a cost we have to cover. That
And the reason that they would need a nurse, which is another logical question, is they're that fragile.
Yeah, sure.
Or they need a wheelchair van, and a wheelchair van can only carry, 4 or 5 students because of the size of wheelchairs.
Yep.
And they have to be specially equipped. So those are more expensive rides. So you can pay for a child in a wheelchair to get back and forth to school per day,
$350 a day.
$350 a day, just to get them to the educational setting.
Yeah, because we're paying for the for the transportation as well.
Right.
Correct.
So, I mean, it's fun, it's always worth, I think, just walking through this with people, because people don't know this. And when I say this, and it happens in every single town in Massachusetts, but nobody knows that this is going on, so I think it's good. It helps me that hopefully you know, and continue to ask questions.
It's definitely something that's been enlightening in the years that I've now been on the committee and finding out about this. It's information that I had no idea of before.
Is there any way to take it out of the school budget and put it in something else, or does it have to be in the
It
school
is-
budget?
It is legally mandated
Yeah.
that it's in the school.
So I can't defend why they do it, but I can tell you why they do it. I think they do it because they think we're closest to knowing what the needs of the children are and working with families. And I think they do it at a reimbursement that's less than 100%, because that's sort of an incentive to keep costs down. Because if it was just 100% reimbursement, people wouldn't worry about the bill. So I think the state reimburses at a less of a percentage.
About the due diligence of placements.
Yeah, so,
We spend,
Those are-
a-
go
and
ahead.
there's a lot of time that is spent also with the special education out-of-district coordinator, making sure that the placements are educationally appropriate and cost, they balance both the needs of the child and the cost for the placement. So, a $200,000 placement is not done easily. There's also progression. A student who's in a public school, and if that's not meeting their needs, will often go to a collaborative, North River Collaborative, South Shore Collaborative. That costs less than a private setting, and then the last would be a private setting, day school, and then if their needs can't be met there, then it's a residential program. So you don't skip. We have some students that are $48,000 a year, and we have others that are $400,000 a year.
yeah. So under other school services, we know that we have a transportation increase of 4% in our contract coming, and that's a $28,650 increase. Special education transportation is an estimate, and we talked a little bit about how that fluctuates because of everything I already described. You can assume why that. Placement changes, family moved in, child needs change, so that's an estimate. Electricity, natural gas, and materials. So I'm happy to tell you that by May 1st, the solar field on top of the new building will be functioning. That combined with the power purchasing agreement that Rick LaFond signed for the town will save us $100,000 a year. So this increase of $25,000 for the amount of electricity being used in, the increased HVAC system, the increase in electricity is really, I know that $25,000 going up is a bad thing, but having the solar field where we're going to make 0.5 megawatt of energy on our own every year, and we're going to use it in that building, is huge. It's also, it's also a green approach.
What was the increase before, I remember discussing the increase before we were planning, before the solar, the anticipated increase in the electric budget?
Well, that and the power purchasing agreement,
Wow.
you would add $100,000 to this. But both combined we anticipate will save us that money. So,
That's factoring in the cost of the solar field on the
Correct.
roof of the school.
We didn't pay, we,
Comes from the school building.
oh, yeah, no, we're leasing.
we're leasing the roof space to a company, so they had to pay for the install, they pay for the 20 years of maintenance, and then we get the benefit of the electricity.
And the reason we did that is because we're not in the solar business. We don't have the expertise to maximize the efficiencies on a solar field. And they want to because they're benefiting from this too if it works to maximum efficiency.
Because they get back a certain amount of the
Yep.
electricity.
They have incentives, yeah.
So that provides a preliminary budget of $22,812,815. I'm sorry, $22,812,815. And then the all-day kindergarten piece, I've separated out so that we can talk specifically about that, because I know that's something of high interest and something that's important to be specific about. So when we subtract out the tuitions that we've been collecting, that will cost us $275,955.
Lisa, I think, had a good question at the beginning. We're required to educate a kindergartner for half a day. So you pay for the first half, and then a family would pay tuition for the second half. So that's how they would stay for the full day. And so that tuition reduction is because we can't, you don't offer free full-day kindergarten and then collect that tuition back.
So in order to do this, we anticipate we will need to hire 2 teachers, add 2 paraprofessionals, and then the additional miscellaneous costs are the people to supervise lunch, recess, supplies and materials, and then other portions of special teacher programs. So for example, our kindergartners currently get a music portion and PE, and in order to provide those services for everybody, we would need to hire a 0.1 person, a fraction of a person, to make sure that they got the full program. So that rounds out the bill, the estimated total bill for all-day kindergarten at $456,525. So, but what I want to point out to you, I've got another sheet somewhere, is that the sheet that, it's actually just a bigger breakdown, the same numbers, bigger breakdown, but it adds a little bit of information at the end. So all these numbers are what I just described to you. So based on the best information available, both from the state of Massachusetts in terms of reimbursement, but then also from a third party who is the person, Mark Abrams, who actually teaches business managers how to anticipate Chapter 70 funding, is that Abington should get an increased Chapter 70 aid in the following year. It would be just over $400,000. So if the town were able to take the available free cash and front this program in subsequent years based on the best information available, there would be a reimbursement that would pay for 95% of it. But this, people should know that this additional cash to Abington from the state is because of this all-day kindergarten program and the increased enrollment that we're seeing across the town.
Because you get a per student.
Because we get a per-student reimbursement for every student that we educate.
So that includes the 110 you were talking about?
That includes the 110, which is about a 6% increase to our student population.
Are we going to get any more money in FY19 for FY18 because we had more people?
That's a great question. We are not, because we don't surpass a threshold to trigger that additional reimbursement in terms of the foundations. But the combination of both the kindergarten and these new students do. And the benefit that provides is not only do we get additional money in Chapter 70, we get, people, you as a community, you've invested good, hard-earned tax dollars in your schools. And this is a return that you're getting on your investment. Not only is it a return in increased Chapter 70 money, but it's decreasing the enrollment at South Shore Vocational, which comes off of another balance sheet, which also helps the community. And it's my opinion that the more children that you have in Abington that are educated by your public schools servicing your community, the healthier it is for your community, because that's more residents that are invested in the health of your entire town. And if you have some vision about and pride in this town, which I know that Abington has quite a bit of, isn't that what you want your schools and your community and your town services to do and provide? And so, you invested hard-earned dollars in the new building, and it's with respect that we take those and try to maximize those. And this is a benefit of that investment that you've made. So thank you. And we know these numbers aren't in check with what Rick and the team at the town hall have at this point for us. We're going to continue to deliberate over our budget and look to make reductions as we approach town meeting. I hope that we get to a place where there's consensus as prior to town meeting. So I want to answer any questions that people have.
What year of the contract are you in right now?
Finishing up the last year of the third year, so we have to negotiate for subsequent another 3-year. Generally, it's a 3-year.
So you're currently in the third year of a 3-year?
We're finishing up the last year.
Okay. And what is the percent increase to the salary increase? Do you know
For
what
next
that
year?
is?
There isn't one because we haven't negotiated it yet.
The 576,000.
I don't know what it will be. Oh,
On your
oh,
summary.
how much is,
So there's an enablement to negotiate, so
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, we haven't negotiated that yet.
Okay. And the IT, the tech position, it's a .5 position. Is it a part-time that you're going to hire, or is it a part-time that you're going to add to an already existing part-time?
that would be full-time, a new person.
That was a full-time.
ELA, I think it was.
And the ELA is
It was
a
a
part-time,
half.
is a half-time.
Okay, so the ELA half-time then, is that a full new body that you'll be hiring, or is,
It would have to be a new body. We don't have anybody who's half-time to round out that other half. And,
One
you know,
of
we've
the
got to make this
questions-
balanced
One of the
budget.
questions is always if it's a person who's going from part-time to full-time,
Yep.
how that affects benefits and all of the other costs to the town. So
So,
moving someone in as a half-time position is different than moving someone up from half-time to full-time.
The cost.
and so these are currently proposed positions, because we don't have the money for them. So I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that clear.
Last, what is the total special education transportation cost? I know that's the, with the increase. With the-
I'll find it in 1 second.
By the way, the 576 is the proposed, or no?
The 576,209 is
You
the
can talk about
proposed
subsequent
Yeah.
contractual increase.
There's a proposed contractual increase, but
Salaries.
we don't, but it's not,
It is currently under negotiation.
gotcha.
So what happens is, if we don't provide some funding for that, we settle the contract, then we don't, how do you pay that without laying people off? Because
Yeah.
that's all we do,
Yeah,
is pay salary. I mean, we do more than that. We buy electricity and pencils and
I
things, but,
understand. The big one's that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Our special education transportation budget is, with the anticipated increase, is $414,000. Yeah. I do want to say, though, with the contractual obligations piece, part of that is a negotiated COLA, but there's also a part, teachers, depending on their experience in education, get steps, and some get steps and lanes, depending how long they've been in Abington and what their education is, so that's in there. Same with other contracts, there's other things like that, so that's not just
Raises.
COLA.
Correct.
Yeah.
And for those who may not have understood steps and lanes, part of that has to do with years of tenure, part of it has to do with degrees and education that they achieve, and
Correct.
it changes the amount that they are,
Correct.
that they are paid under
A
the.
step is
under the-
how many years, and a lane is their education.
Lisa?
What is this, on this one here, the 1.3 million?
I was actually gonna ask that question myself.
That's,
I think you did.
That's funny, because I asked it, that's the total increase.
Including kindergarten. So the line above it, the 4.13%, is the proposed increase without kindergarten,
That's the 22.
22,812, yep.
904
So it's the-
plus 456?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm curious about the special ed, because I have no idea like how that really works. What percentage of the students would you say have some kind of IEP, something to think about?
So generally in Massachusetts, I'll give you two numbers.
students.
In Abington, it runs about 14 or 15%. That's not off from the Massachusetts trend.
And that's everything from in-district students who receive support in a regular education classroom all the way to out-of-district.
So do students generally tend to, and I know it's different for everybody, but do they like start in kindergarten with the IEP and kind of outgrow it?
Depends on the child. So every individual's different. Some children, their special needs aren't identified until could be in high school, could be middle school, and then other children are identified by early intervention before they even come to us in pre-K or kindergarten. It would, every single situation would, is different.
You said
Yeah.
it expires every year. So every year, the parents and staff meet to come up with a new one. And that's what Peter said, they could outgrow it. So adjustments are made based on what the staff feels their needs are, and the parents feel their needs are. At that time, they come into agreement on what their goals should be for that year, and then The following year, it's revisited again until it's not, until it's gone.
For every student.
Yeah, well, for every
On an
student that's
edit-
on one,
on
that's
that
on an yeah.
Well, yeah.
Or a
yeah.
504.
The
is also-
15%.
So the other thing that can happen is if we're doing our jobs effectively, we can teach children skills to overcome their disabilities, and so they compensate for those. And so we have children who have disabilities who aren't on educational plans because they've developed skill sets to overcome those disabilities and then function at and access the curriculum the way that I described. So that's the goal.
Yeah.
So one of the important pieces, and it says, it's on the budget, special ed piece also in here, that part of why we want to develop programs within the district for students with special needs is because once a student goes to an out-of-district placement, it's more difficult to be able to provide what they need back in the district. So you want to provide however you can, provide a program for all the other reasons that Peter talked about, but also because once a student goes out of district, it's much more difficult to bring them back.
Basically, as a family, once you decide that your child's in a good place, it's hard to agree to change
take
that.
them out of that place. Yeah.
So,
But we also have, Jim Thomas spends a lot of time making sure that we aren't paying for stuff that we may not necessarily need to be paying for. Sometimes there's students that aren't actually owned by Abington, depending on their situation, their living arrangement. So, because I know people ask a lot about the assistant superintendent duties.
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, for example, you're talking about is checking the attendance, just to make sure that, if a child's going to an out-of-district placement, that they're actually there, they're going. Because we don't want to lose touch. As Chris said, you come back and you continually review their goals to make sure that their goals for their learning are on track, or that they don't need to be improved or maybe backed off on. Because the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to provide services for a child that they don't need, because they want them to function as much as an individual as possible, because that's the goal for them to be successful in life. So you pull those things back as you can slowly, and you set those goals annually, or you ramp them up annually, depending on what they need.
So one of the 2.5 new positions that you talked about in here was the middle school special education person. Part of what you were talking about was being able to do things both better and more efficiently, having a person in the school. The number we have on here, does that just provide the cost of the position, or does it factor in, like, the line above it, the retirement, where people would be replaced at a lower rate? Does that factor in expected cost savings of having a person in that position?
Yes. That 5,86924 is a sum of those three numbers, and then we reduced in that line below it the special education tuitions as much as we could offset that, because we feel strongly we have to add that person for all the reasons we described.
And there will, I anticipate, be movement, hopefully downward, in that programs with other districts account based on having the special education teacher. And you might have alluded to it earlier, you do, other years is the April 1st cutoff. So in the state of Massachusetts, there's an April 1st cutoff date for special education. So if someone moves in or out of your district after April 1st, then the district that they came from is financially responsible for them. So after April 1st, we have a level of confidence, a better level of confidence, that if someone within the state of Massachusetts moves into Abington, that we don't need to be, we will not be financially responsible. Now, if someone moves in from Hawaii, then we are financially responsible. but there is after April 1st, move-in law, you do have a little more confidence. So we'll be looking with Dr. Thomas at the student rosters we have now, and as you move towards the end of the year, you have a better understanding of, or anticipating how your students are going to do in the following year.
But be rest assured, we get very few students from Hawaii. So we will not have to budget for that.
Culture shock.
I think we always say Florida.
So I have a couple questions on the all-day kindergarten and on the laptops. What do you want to do first?
Whichever you want to go with.
Let's go laptops first.
No, laptops are going to be complicated. Okay. The all-day kindergarten, I'm assuming you're still going to offer half-day kindergarten for people that want it.
Very few people generally take that option, but that would be available for somebody to have their student leave. Obviously, we can't, we're not going to say, no, you can't go.
But we won't have a half-day classroom.
We won't have a half-day classroom for
So
them.
finding out, it wouldn't be a way to lower this number to make it a little bit more digestible to the public by saying, okay, well, only this amount is doing half-day versus this that's doing full day. So that it's going to be open full day
Right.
for every student, whether you use it or not.
Right.
Okay.
And the experience of other districts is you may get 2 or 3.
So it really wouldn't impact it anyways to.
But then you're not required, I'm sorry, Mike, but the transportation, if you're, how does that work?
You'd have to provide transportation.
But you'd be.
For the half day?
You being the school? Or you being the?
Yeah. Half-day?
The parents chose to pick
It's a great question. I haven't thought about that one. I'm assuming they would have to, but I'm not certain.
Yeah. I mean, my experience, it's a very few students, and if it's any, it's at the beginning of the year. Their parents are concerned that their students might not be able to do a full day, and then they become full day.
Peter?
I think if we had that situation with transportation, we would use a special education van.
But correct me if I'm wrong, if you go to full day, then the curriculum totally changes. And it, I guess from what I understand, the child who's going from the full day of kindergarten into first grade is better prepared.
Yes. So you missed that.
It's just not playtime
Yeah.
for the whole day anymore.
Oh, I should tell you that. The kindergarten, I mean, when I went, I've said this before, when I went to kindergarten, we used to glue macaroni to a plate, and I'd bring it to my mom, and she was very proud of me. And that's what kindergarten was. Kindergarten now is, I mean, you should see it. It's amazing what teachers are doing with our kindergartners. It's fun, but yet they're developing these skills around reading and math and communication and science that are, I mean, you need to see it to just understand how much different it is.
They're dissecting owl pellets.
Yeah. So it's
But to
amazing.
keep up
Yeah.
in the world today, that's what they need to be doing.
I mean, I think it's sometime the state could mandate it anyway, and then, I mean, we would have to go with it, so.
What the kindergarten teachers are doing with kids are they're amazing. I couldn't do it myself, but they are amazing.
Sorry for, see, that was the easy one. So the laptops.
Yeah.
A lot of questions about the laptops. So we're getting initially
1,100.
1,100,
Yep.
and that's out of the budget that we have for the school building.
The new building, yep.
Have we looked into, so after that initial 1,100, what do we do? Who becomes financially responsible for the laptops? I think these are a great idea. These are just questions that
Yep.
have come to my mind. Like, when the student gets a laptop, who becomes financially responsible for damages?
So I'll,
Is it a tablet or is it a laptop?
Laptop.
it's a laptop.
It is a laptop.
Yep, it's going to be a Lenovo
They've
laptop.
been purchased.
So
In the Chrome OS? Or
No.
they run on Windows?
they're running Windows.
537 a unit.
So what's going to happen is there are enough to replenish and cannibalize to keep everybody running. Other systems, every system that's built a building has had a one-to-one initiative, because it's the only way you pay for it, to be honest with you. Or they do a bring your own, which people have to buy their own and bring them to school. If you're not building a building, that's how you do it. If you're building a building, everybody's done one-to-one initiatives. So the kids have been very responsible with them, to be quite honest with you. At the end of the year, you get people that may pick them up by the screen and break the screen. That may happen, 5, 6 computers. Somebody may leave it in a car, and it may get cooked. But they haven't had significant damages to computers. So there's enough to replenish those computers. We're also writing policy language so that if you are somebody who's malicious to the computer, there's a way for us to try to claw back that money and say, you know what, this is the 3rd time you left it in the car and fried it. Let's face it, you're not leaving it, something else is going on here. So there's policy to claw back that money, because one of the difficulties we would have is when you're a public school and you give everybody a book, everybody's got to have a book, because that's how you're getting the math and the English. And so to not give everybody a computer, if you're breaking the computer, or if you broke a computer, it's like not giving you a book. We got to give you a book. So
Could you
that's our plan.
do something in the way of, like, you only give the laptops to the high school students and, from 8 to 12 or whatever it is?
Yep.
Or is that already what we're talking about?
Nope,
Am I
you-
just missing the boat?
no, I haven't brought it up,
Yep.
but you're right on. What we're doing is grades 7 through 12.
Okay.
We're not going to do because at the elementary level, they've got carts and
You go what?
carts with laptops in them that plug in, and then they take those laptops out and they use them in the room. So,
And we're also repurposing. Through the building project, we've talked about repurposing of technology. So the laptop carts that we currently have being used in grades 7 through 12, because the students will have a laptop, will be repurposed down to the elementary level. So although it won't be a 1-to-1 at the elementary level, it'll be a 1 to 3.
It would be better
1 to
than
4.
the one Apple IIe that my school had when I was in elementary school.
so just to kind of give you an example of how a classroom would work, a teacher can, this is what we're working on now, piloting programs to change the way people are teaching. So, you've got a dozen students in the center of the room, and they're debating the causes of, the Revolutionary War. And the students on the outside have their laptops, and they're arguing, but on their laptops, on blog posts with each other. And then as homework, all the students go to those threads on the blog and then go out on the internet with really thoughtfully, good sources, not the junk that you can find out there, and back up their arguments for homework about the causes of the Civil War. And so that's how it's not kids sitting in rows anymore with somebody with a piece of chalk. That's how it changes how classrooms function. That's just like one example. If we're doing it right, those are the kinds of things we want to do.
And we have the teachers to change that, because that's a big,
Yeah.
that's a big different step
Yep.
than what we had probably the previous year or whatever, how people were trained, the teachers trained and even just taught, right?
You are 100% right, and that's that position. That's the integrationist. Does those model lessons with people, does that professional development. So we've been working on the platforms with the technology, and but we're not to where I just described.
In most classrooms.
In most classrooms, we have a couple of people that are, but
So,
And I'm sorry, Mike, too, I think, obviously, one of the things we learned in building committee meetings is that.
Rick, just real quick, can you come towards the mic? I know last week we had trouble with
Sure,
the
no.
audio for.
One of the things that, would you mind, Greg? Yeah, I'm kidding, yeah. You are kidding, right? Yeah. Thanks. One of the things we learned in the building committee meetings is that any of the newer buildings built in at least the last half a decade or so, have all integrated these laptops. So they wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. I think they have a lot to learn, the good, the bad, and the ugly, hopefully, to integrate, whether it's problems with laptop usage and how best to take advantage of some of the problems that the other districts have had too. Not to mention the good things with regarding integration of lesson plans, et cetera, but how to deal with whether they be discipline or vandalism or whatever the case is. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to that too, because we deal with insurance issues, so we're looking forward to some of the lessons we can learn from other districts too. So thank you, Greg. Well done. Appreciate that. So.
I was curious, what is the long-term plan in regards to keeping us in line with the curve? Because obviously technology is obsolete seconds after it comes out. So, sitting here in 5 years with having to get 1,100 new laptops, or is there a program that we're going to be, like, after 3 years, maybe swapping out this group, this group, this group? Is there been any discussion, or because other communities have these, are we looking at their models to kind of, stay ahead of that curve and plan now for that inevitability?
We'd want to, like you had said, sort of chip away at it with more of a revolving cycle rather than all at one swoop. So I would anticipate that 4 or 5 years out, we're making a purchase to replace certain portions. The year after that, another portion. Year after that, another portion. But we all know that funding today doesn't exist. That will be a challenge for us 4 or 5 years down the road.
Yep.
Just curious, because
one of the things that we had talked about when the laptops were first brought up was that kind of a process. When the police are in, we're looking at maybe every year, every other year, replacing a cruiser or two, and we know it's a cost that is going to have to happen. I think the laptops will be very much the same way. The thing that's hard to anticipate is what they'll be replaced by and what technology will be 5 years from now.
Because potentially it could be, to replace what is a $500 laptop today might be $200 in 5 years.
Right. Or with the way technology is moving, who knows? Maybe it'll be these phones that they're bringing anyway, and it's more. We won't know. Or a keyboard that functions with your phone. I don't know. We don't know.
What about our how will it, or will it, decrease the actual textbook budget?
That's a great question.
So,
Yeah,
can
that's
that
a logical
offset a little
question.
bit with the, because we're always,
Yeah.
every so many years, we need to replace textbooks, so will we not have to replace those textbooks in 5 years? And so that will maybe defray some of the cost of trying to keep the laptops.
In some circumstances, we'll be buying software licenses. In some circumstances, we'll be buying the textbooks, depending on what area. Depends on what best fits the need for the class. Here's the thing that's happened. The textbook companies have figured out how to maintain the textbook companies. So they charge about as much for the license, for the software to access their curriculum online, as they do for a textbook. The price points are about the same. That's why they have boxes at Fenway and Gillette.
And unfortunately, they only usually last 5 years. So you buy a license this year, it lasts 5 years, as opposed to a textbook that if you don't have the money in 5 years, then you do 6, 7, 10. You do, and so the textbook companies they're making their money.
So I don't anticipate you're going to spend more money, but you don't save
You're not going
money.
to realize the savings.
Yeah.
And to be fair to the textbook companies, just somewhat fair at least, what we are purchasing from them is really the intellectual property that's in the textbook,
You're right.
Yep.
not the paper and the binding.
I apologize to anybody who works for a textbook company. That I'm
Just a tiny little.
The big question.
A friend in intellectual property who would chastise me if I didn't say something
So,
of that sort.
and this is obviously probably a moot point, but could we have done tablets? The only reason I say it is because they're so much less expensive. I'm not talking about an iPad, I'm talking about, the Samsung, whatever my kids just got that were $60 each. I'm not saying you guys needed those, but did anybody ever do sort of like that research to say, look, tablets are getting to the point right now where they're roughly running-ish PC stuff?
we did spend time on that, and that's why it's such a good question. There's really two reasons that we went with what we went with. When most of the kids that we service are going off to college or work, people at college or work are using laptops.
Yeah.
They're not using tablets, so we want to prepare them for work and college life next. And then the other reason is that rather than the Chromebooks, the accessibility, to have that functionality of a laptop rather than the Chromebook that doesn't have the same functionality when it's not connected, provides a benefit that was worth the additional
It just
cost.
might be one of those things on the next one, you know, whenever that and the reason that I say it is because even my business is completely online. I use my phone, it's probably not great for everybody to hear this, but I use my phone for 90% of what I do. I do have a laptop, and that's literally what I function off of when I'm in the office, but everything's sort of there at this point, Microsoft Online, there's all these things, so maybe on the next one, we could dive a little deeper on that one, just because I know that it saves a lot of money.
And more, we're moving to this.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying, like, this is basic. I mean, I literally use everything for my phone. And again, my kids' little whatever they have is roughly this without being able to pick it up.
And
So,
like I was saying before, we don't know what the technology is going to be moving
Absolutely.
forward. I know with my company, we used to require, like we used to have the company provided cell phones for people who were on call.
yep.
And after a certain amount of time, they did away with it because everybody had a cell phone.
Right.
They didn't need to provide a company cell phone to people because they had their own that they were already
Yep.
using. And the minutes were not costing people a fortune anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't know what it
Exactly.
will look like, but I think Mike's point is very good in we definitely need to be looking at what the schedule will be and when we will be phasing out what we're purchasing now.
And just the last question really is more a software and a rights issue, like, what do we do? Do we have measures in place to keep inappropriate accesses? Let's
Yep.
just keep it like that. Whether it is programs, games, anything else, like, how locked down are these? And that is definitely a changing number, because I know, you know, there is going to be at least a handful of students that are going to be able to get around any block that we put on.
So they will have firewall protection. It will be updated. It doesn't provide, as you know, 100% guarantee. But it'll be one that when someone does get around it, it'll be because they've raised to that level of hacker that we probably nobody could stop them.
They're developing skills
That we
need to
could maybe
channel.
hire them as
They might become our IT person.
Yeah, but they have, because, you know, I need to, you know, I feel responsible. We're sending these home with kids that they filter out certain content. And it gets pretty aggravating sometimes. I mean, there's two things. I mean, the filters we use are pretty aggravating too. Because if you're doing a science project on, you know, the three-toed frog, I don't even know there is such a thing, but let's say you're doing that, and it describes how it mates, you know, that could be filtered out because sex is in there. And so, but that's what we do. Then you put in a request to open up this site, then somebody opens it up for you because it's appropriate. And so it's a pretty rigorous safeguard system, but there, as you know, I'd be either foolish or not telling the truth if I didn't say people wouldn't be able to somehow get around it with some sophistication.
I know we have an IT person, right?
So we have the town IT department, Wayne Norling, that has come in. The school has separate technology.
So that person could do some things that would help in stuff like that, like when the laptop comes back on, I'm assuming there's Wi-Fi in the school?
Yep.
And the laptop comes back on that server, if that's a server in there, it could do some sort of a check, stuff like that. I just know that we do that,
Yep.
just to keep things secure. So it can do checks like that. Again, I don't know how much money it's gonna save or not save.
He has those systems
Yep.
set up
Okay.
so that if it's over in the evening, it does that the system does that filtering.
Yep.
And so I can double check to make sure that that's also in place for those laptops when they get lit up when kids show up.
Yep.
They were collecting them at the end of the summer also to be cleaned up
Yep.
and re-imaged. So, I mean, not at the end of the summer,
End of
end of the school year, sorry.
Which actually, my next question was, obviously, we're gonna re-imaging them at the end of the summer, at the end of the school year.
I got everybody doing
The
it.
summer.
Will
It's
there
a
be
long
like
day.
a midpoint at all, like, for a sampling to, especially in like the first couple of years, to see how the laptops are holding up and, you know, where, is there gonna be any type of a program like turn them in for like a weekend so we can go through, like, has there been any thought in that to see, to almost gauge how our security is keeping them locked down and how just the laptops themselves are handling up to the day-to-day stress?
So we do have a filtering system that has checks in it that collects, like, I guess, harvests data about where people are going and what they're doing and sends red flags. So if kids are opening up their laptop and hooking onto the Wi-Fi and things aren't bad things, they're going to bad places, it collects information on that. So through the IT department.
And there will be a 3-year service contract with it.
That was a big question that I had, and not, I'm sure nobody wants to hear about these laptops, but was there something purchased to keep them from, you know, I mean, I drop my stuff, I drop it, I buy a new one, they drop it, break it.
We're buying a case.
Yep, we're buying a neoprene case that they'll each have, and then
Perfect.
there is a 3-year maintenance agreement, but not for destruction. But we have a IT department of 2 people, which is a concern, adding 1,100 laptops into the mix. But they have the skill that they can, if it's not something that needs to be sent out, that they'll be able to do some repairs in-house, which also will get their hands on laptops pretty regularly, I would assume, to just kind of see how they're holding out.
Just to his point, I mean, there's gonna actually probably be a decent amount of updates, things like that. Now, I know a lot of stuff is sort of online and gets
Pushed,
in,
yeah.
whatever, but there are some things that are probably, they're gonna need their hands on. So maybe those are good times, or whatever you're thinking, on how to make sure they're doing okay.
You know, I can, and so other districts have experienced exactly what you're talking about, and your questions really are well-founded. I'll tell you this, and I don't think I'm being, too Pollyannic or naive in saying this. We have pretty good kids in Abington, who are most of them are pretty responsible.
Yep.
And so there will be a couple of outliers that are gonna test us. I know there are.
Yeah.
But to give the community credit, we have some pretty good kids, generally speaking, that are really gonna benefit from this.
I think too, a lot of kids now have gotten used to having to be responsible for phones and iPads and.
Not my
when
kids,
they,
but.
Well, I
Sure,
have one of those too.
Some of my
But I think for the most part.
It's not the novelty.
It's not new like it was,
It's really a tool now.
Right.
It's not a novelty.
it's very commonplace.
Other questions,
So-
Lisa?
As I understand what you just said, tell me if I'm wrong, that your IT people would be able to tell remotely which particular student was doing something they're not supposed to do with their laptop?
They'd have to check. It doesn't just, they can scan where people are going and where people are. There's guards that you can't go there.
Would they be able to pinpoint the student?
They would be able to know the computer number.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Which has an IP address. and-
You mean by pinpoint the student, like where they are, like in?
No.
I got what you're saying.
Like who's doing something they're not supposed to be
By
doing.
serial
Yeah,
number.
each computer has like a thumbprint,
Yeah.
By serial number. Who
Until they
who
say
got
it wasn't me, somebody took.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was wondering, is there kind of an average cost of textbooks per student? Say on the high school level, is there an average?
So I mean, I can tell you that sometimes one textbook can cost $60, $70. It would depend on what classes they were taking. So, I mean, you
So
could,
rough, like 1,000 a year.
Oh,
no,
per student. No, well, the textbooks last, so, we have a textbook replacement cycle, but for example, we'll be purchasing new Spanish textbooks, which
Yeah,
are
they're probably 15 to 20 years
15,
old.
20 years old. There's some,
Must last, right?
Yeah.
Spanish probably hasn't changed.
right,
Yeah, like Spanish doesn't change, so
Right.
like that I'm assuming you can use for like a long time.
Right.
correct,
Yeah.
right. But so it's hard to say what the average cost is per year, because there are other,
That's why they're that old.
Yeah, like science.
yeah, and
Math now.
the state changes the frameworks. There's going to be a change to the history frameworks, which will, we'll have to do some textbook updates at the secondary level based on those. So it's hard.
But also, the other reason that we got away with 20-year-old Spanish books is because our Spanish teachers supplement with other resources. So culturally, things have changed 20 years ago, in Spanish-speaking countries, and so what they'll do is they'll work very hard to supplement. And so that's how we got away with that.
What do you mean?
So they'll bring other materials in, online materials or resources, or they'll bring in
Runoff,
magazines or books or
papers, what they have.
Or like maybe
Go to
that.
certain
other
websites.
resources to improve, because,
Sending the kids to specific websites, things of that nature.
And even that, when you think about it, like technology and the Spanish language, how much has changed in technology that you need to learn in the Spanish language that you
Yeah.
have needed to
Didn't even
learn,
have-
Words that didn't
when.
exist.
the alphabet is the same, conjugating verbs is probably the same, but there are other components that are important to include in the experience that they've been working hard to supplement, so.
Did you have another question?
No, that was it.
No, actually, I just want to make a comment about the kindergarten, if you don't mind.
And actually, I was going to, when we exhausted our questions, I was going to open up to see if the people who had attended had specific questions.
I'm just completely against it, and I thought no, I'm just kidding. Obviously, Peter and Felicia know this, but, and the budget model that you've all seen too really contemplates a 3% increase in the school budget. And that's which also contemplates essentially a 3% operational increase in the entire municipal budget, including the school budget, so it's not peculiar to the school budget.
Again, I'm sorry.
I said the budget model, operational model, it contemplates a 3% increase in the school budget.
Your current.
Correct,
okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you, Barbara. Which essentially means that the operational budget maintains the same split, if you want to call it that, between the school budget and the non-school operational budgets, which is approximately 69% of the municipal budget, overall budget is on school, and the remainder is in the non-school operational budgets, which is obviously a big piece of these town spending, which is not a complaint from me, by the way. It's a complaint from everybody else in town. That's supposed to be get a grin out of Peter. Thank you, okay.
You got it.
Okay, so the goal for us is to, if we maintain that, with the help we get from the relief in our VOTEC budget next year, with the money we have in free cash, which again, that isn't luck, that's now several years of good budget performance that results in free cash, we'll be able to maintain some modest capital expenditures, deal with our snow and ice over expenditure, and would allow us seed money for the kindergarten program. It would not allow us to dedicate funds for stabilization and OPEB savings this year, which is a deviation from what we'd like to do in most years. But, obviously Peter and Felicia are well aware of this. They, as you know, are part of the financial team that has helped us get to this point. So On the other hand, I think you're all well aware too that we have performed well. We just had solidified another very strong budget, bond rating, AA bond rating, AA solid. And our audit reports continue to be very good. So I think we're in good shape, but this is a policy decision. This isn't, and a little bit of a leap of faith based upon the best information we have available that indeed, that this year's FY19 expenditures will result in a Chapter 78 return that will essentially pay for the seed money we put in this year. So that being said, it's a leap of faith because none of us can predict whether or not the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is going to change a Chapter 78 formula, if the economy is going to go down in flames. And one of the things that Peter and I lament is that we've both been through some very bad, not to date ourselves, but we've been through a couple really bad economic downturns in our long careers, and it's very difficult when we have to deal with downsizing government. That being said, you can't be afraid of the future. And based upon everything we know at this time, if the budget model we have in place stays the way it looks, our fixed costs are reasonably under control, and again, continues raining. I won't say the other word. Continues raining, and we are prepared to seed a kindergarten program rather than put money towards savings. That's the age-old question: do we provide service or do we put money in the bank? That's the question for the community. I think we probably, if not now, when? If not now, when becomes the question in terms of a kindergarten program. And I can tell you, and they'll probably be wishing I never said this, but even, our major other department heads are in the same, are also supportive of, if not now, when are we going to do this? And so there's a lot of collaboration internally, not just with our financial officers group, but our other department heads that, this might be as good a time as ever if our other factors that are in place continue to hold, and there's no reason to think that's not going to happen. So, but it is a policy decision with regard to what we do with free cash. But it is another strong year for free cash. We do have funds to do some key capital and other one-time needs, like, for instance, our Glenowitz Way, getting these utilities underground is one of the things we'd like to do, and there are some other issues too. So, but that's just one thing I wanted to point out. But the budget model of, again, bringing the school budget in at the operational budget at 3%, I know is still a challenge, but that's a key to making this all work. So,
You said the savings thing, so every year we chose to sort of put in savings, or recently, or do we normally, I haven't been here, so that's why I'm asking.
There's the policy of using a certain amount of free cash that would be certified every year to put it into stabilization, and a certain amount that would go towards savings for retiree health insurance, and a certain amount that would be used for capital outlay, certain amount for projects. So
High percentage.
yeah, like 60% for stabilization, 40% towards OPEB, 10% towards
being
other.
post-employment
Thank you.
benefits,
Yeah.
just
So
for those post-employment benefits.
Right,
Just
right.
for those who don't know.
Right. So again, it's not a legal requirement. It's a policy guideline. So really, that's the question. Do you deviate from that for a year, or? So we have approximately $1.5 million in stabilization at the moment. So again, that's,
And we were just talking last time about taking out loans, right, and paying
well, that's borrowing.
risk on that, though, you know what I mean? It's a little bit of a pain now, get it back.
Well, I think you're talking about borrowing for certain types of capital, which is,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do want to ask, without stepping away from policy for a year, do you know, or can you get me the information from Sonia if that would affect our bond rating at all for AA stable, you
Yes.
think?
Yes,
Tonight?
yes.
Um,
Well, it wouldn't affect,
By not
I would say it
adding-
wouldn't affect our bond rating. We're not actually doing any major borrowings in the next year or two anyway. I mean, we just did a water main borrowing with the school is borrowed. So I don't foresee, but the question will be asked though, Barbara. But
Okay, and
that's,
you
yeah.
said at one point,
Right.
about $1.5 million?
About $1.5 million in stabilization at the moment, correct,
And
yes.
does our current budget that we're working off of right now not take into account the decrease in the VOTEC?
It does, yes, it does. Well, yeah, well, we have built it in now.
Right.
We have built it in, and, and
But our most updated budget that we're working off of
Yes.
includes the reduction in the
the,
VOTEC
correct, that is correct,
assessment.
yes.
I'm not sure we've gotten,
Perhaps not, and of course, it's like any model, you can look at it from many different directions, and, but we'll,
I didn't even necessarily mean that.
yes.
I meant that.
right,
the one that
We're
our
working
financial
off of-
group,
they are working.
which includes our, again, the internal players, including Peter and Felicia, the one we're working on does include
We're
that,
still
yes,
looking at a draft
Yes.
that you're
correct.
constantly updating. Last question.
Oh, and the one other thing I didn't add is that the other thing we are still looking to try to do is, at least towards the latter half of next fiscal year, is to try to bring build back the detective unit into the police department, which, again, towards the latter half of next fiscal year, rather than wait till 2020.
Now, see, I had a last question, but now you get into that, so,
So you can all thank
one
me.
question. How do you, so first, have the selectmen, I haven't seen a recent meeting as far as any policy direction. Have you received any policy direction from the selectmen as far as, stepping away from, the,
No, they have not, they have not discussed it. They are obviously aware of the, the initiative on full-day kindergarten. They have not taken a vote on that. Their overall goals have, for the last several years, has been the rebuilding of the staffing in the police department. So absorbing the formerly funded, grant-funded positions into the current budget is obviously one of the things that has been within their policy goal. So that has been the number one initiative, was, again, the police staffing, so. They have not taken any initiative, any direction on the use of free cash for the coming fiscal year. They have not discussed that, other than listening and seeing a budget update outlining the need for use of free cash in order to seed the kindergarten program. So they're aware of that, the need to do that, if that's going to happen for the coming fiscal year.
So I think one of the important questions and distinctions with this is we're looking at this time to use free cash to seed the full-day kindergarten. So the question is, after we seed the full-day kindergarten, with the projected increase in money coming back from Chapter 70,
Right.
looking at the numbers based on both increased enrollment and going to full-day kindergarten, it's not completely covering the increase due to adding the kindergarten. Where does that put us
to sustain it?
overall budget-wise in FY '20 and '21 and '22 in maintaining that and comparing it to the detective division and other needs around the town?
I'm just gonna say, we might not wanna have that conversation, mixed all in. Just my opinion.
Yeah, well,
It's two different
Yes.
subjects.
Well, that
And-
was more a question for the town manager.
sure. Well, obviously,
So-
that's clearly what goes on around this table most every Wednesday or every other Wednesday or whatever day the finance team meets, so that's ongoing, correct. Clearly, the Chapter 70 reimbursement, as projected, doesn't completely, but it comes very close to meeting the full reimbursement, which is
And
very,
those are also salary estimates.
very
we haven't
heartening,
hired the people yet,
you know,
so
Yes.
right.
Things
So,
could change with the,
Right.
depending on the,
right,
negotiations.
and
Lots of
clearly,
things change depending on
yes.
what the state looks
exactly. Right.
given year.
And, yeah, I'm sorry.
You mentioned that you have a working model that's newer than what we have. Does that include the part-time detectives for half the year now or not, or?
As of,
You said it?
yes, as of recently, it does, correct.
Okay,
Yes,
so
yes, where we
it
worked with the police chief to get,
includes
yeah,
the money we're saving from the South Shore and also
Yes.
part-time, so.
correct.
It's
Um,
somewhat substantially changed from what we have now, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. And one of the other issues going on, as you know, that is difficult to convey is the fact that we also have several collective bargaining agreements that are still in the works, which would be dealt with through separate, in our case, separate articles at town meeting, not worked into the budget specifically. So we,
Stated,
yes,
budget.
yes,
And somebody asked
Yes.
about the rating, bond rating.
yes.
So is there sort of like an equation that says if you were to go below $1 million, you're not gonna be AA rated?
Well, that.
No, there
Well,
isn't. There-
There's some
There isn't
bigger picture.
there isn't a
Over
quid
the
pro
course of
quo.
time.
If you do this, this will be your rating. There isn't something
It
as
looks like
clear
you're-
as
You're
that.
spending you're
Yeah.
not, that you don't have a savings.
Yeah,
There was a time when
Sure.
we had no
I just
stabilization.
remember
Right.
you said that we
Yeah.
put stabilization, then got a better rating, and,
yeah, there
you
was.
know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, we added to it, whatever it is, that got us the AA. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't gonna maybe kick it down to
Well,
where
that's what I
all
was
other things
asking,
maybe
that's
go
why I was
up.
asking.
Yeah, well, that's why I would
Or
never
what-
suggest that we use stabilization to fund,
Yeah, yeah.
would never suggest that. That would be a very bad idea.
So the money that we save from South Shore VOTEC is we don't have the updated budget, so that kind of already has been redistributed?
Well, again, it becomes part of a bottom line
Okay.
Yeah.
factor as
Well,
opposed
I
to
think we had a
redistributing.
Where
deficit.
that factors
Yeah, so-
that factors into the overall town budget, and
In terms of bottom line,
it
yeah.
was
yeah.
the expenses for the town are slightly lower, so
Right,
the
right.
overall
Right.
comparing expenses and revenue.
So it's
Right.
not like you can say that was for education, so now you need that.
Right, because that's not,
We were looking at a deficit. That's not, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like,
'cause-
But the-
sorry to,
Keeping people
Chris, that's
here.
not part of the school budget. That's
There are-
different.
Yeah, it wasn't on the school budget, but it's like, okay, well, it shows that we really are keeping our students here, so to fund more, to get more
Yeah.
students, and save more money
Um,
down the line, since so it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm new, so.
Well, again, we're not trying to make a case to somebody about that. I mean, it's really, and again, unless we had another major construction project of any sort, our bond rating was important for the school. I mean, the bond rating's always important to some extent. It was important for, again, this, these water project. But again, your bond rating's important when you have a major project you're borrowing for. Not that it becomes unimportant, but there are a lot of things that are important that go into a bond rating. Your financial management, which, again, to the extent that you track, your audit reports for a number of years, your financial factors like your stabilization, the fact that it's not doing this, we're not taking money out of stabilization and other, to fund our budgets. We're not using our free cash, for instance, to fund our budgets. Seating a kindergarten program is not funding an operating budget versus laying, that you would otherwise have to lay people off. That's a different situation.
Different if
You
we
know.
were projecting that we would be paying
Yeah.
money out of free cash
Yeah.
each year.
Correct.
Program.
Right. So, but we will get you an updated, we'll call it budget model, so.
thank you.
Actually, I have another question. So with chapter 70, if we so we added 110 students this year. If next year, say we add 125, would then we maybe get more money because we've now added even more students? With all the new developments and everything, more students coming to the district. Will we then potentially, or would that just increase the whole cost of everything, or how does that work?
We need more teachers.
But how? Yeah.
So we, in the Chapter 70 formula, we talked about that first 100 students didn't get us to that kind of precipice. And now, when you add the half-day kindergarten, the other half of those kids will get over that. And yes, for every additional student, there'll be an increase in the Chapter 70 in that following year. I don't know what that dollar amount is, but there's a potential that it'll be more than the $400,000. But like you said, you add 100 students, they are spread across various grades. They're not all in one grade, but you at some point are going to have to add more services than just a half of a English teacher at the high school. That we are going to start when you add 120 students across 12 grades. It averages 10 students a grade, but it doesn't come out like that.
Right.
You might have to add an additional grade level teacher because you have a bubble that you weren't anticipating because they weren't here in kindergarten.
So this is just a guess. It's not a guess. It's a, we call educated guess in terms of projecting student enrollments in the coming year. So the 110 was a combination of a bunch of things. It was obviously the building of the school. We've had the lowest number of kids per capita, so that's a real number, like based on all the class sizes, leave us compared to any other year historically I can see to go to privates or to go to social vocational. So I anticipate that trend's going to continue. But one of the things was we had a small class graduate from Abington High School. We had a large class move into Abington High School. So that was part of the addition. So we also have those housing starts. They're about 250-ish different starts out there right now.
I mean, the houses they're building are big, so chances are they're going to add.
And we don't know when they're
Adding more storage.
To the
has
class
added
size,
more.
the class that is the senior class right now is a large
right.
class.
And then there's another large one coming into the high school from the middle school, equivalent-ish size. So my guess would be we're at least going to go up 30 or 40 more students. We probably won't see another 110 bump. But the good news is the other communities are seeing downward trends. We're one of the few communities that's seeing an upward trend. And so the housing starts are going to give us some, but we don't know when those are going to come online. It depends on when the house comes online. It depends on obviously how many kids move into those houses. So there's some coming from the housing, and there will continue to be more because we'll have fewer kids trending out and staying in. The combination of those two will
because,
continue.
if a child with very special needs moves into one of those houses, then that can kind of, I don't want anyone to get the impression either that any of us think that anyone requiring a tremendous amount of money for special education shouldn't receive it, because I firmly believe that whether you're absolutely no different learning styles or whether you need to go to a residential program to be able to get your education, you absolutely should have an education. But if a child like that moves into, or two children that are $200,000 student or $400,000 student, and there's no way to know.
Peter talked about the migration of students out. The other thing that I believe we're going to see is families or students would usually leave at natural breaks. So after 6th grade would go to a private for middle school and then high school, or going into high school. That's when we would see that the two students would leave going into 7th grade, going 9th grade. Now that we're in a 5 through 8 middle school, we don't have that natural break. So you're there for 5th grade, most likely you'll stay through 8th grade, and then possibly make the decision going into high school. But again, you're in the same building,
Right.
so I think we're gonna see that trend as well.
Questions? Is there anyone who came tonight that has any specific questions?
Not about computers
Thank you. Anything else for us before you go?
Just that, like I said, we're not going anywhere. You know where we work. Just let us know, and we'll answer whatever questions you have. I want to answer every question you have.
Peter, Alicia, Chris, thank you all.
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
You're ready to, you got it. You got it down. How many years?
A lot of years.
Thank you.
Moving along to our, the additional portion of our schedule. We do have a reserve fund transfer that we need to address, and I will wait a moment as there'll be some bustle as people
Oh,
are
where's,
leaving.
oh.
Rick, would you like to join us at the table for this?
I forgot a question that I had for you while we were going over that.
Jeez.
Do you have the free cash number, the current free cash number?
It is approximately 1,700,000. I'll have to, I can get you the exact.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Not sure.
Got a question for you.
No,
When-
I'm not, yeah, again, I'm not plugged. It's, I'm sorry, it's about 1.1 million. I can get you the exact number. We can, about 1.1.
Oh.
About 1.1 million. I'll email it out to you tomorrow. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I just took it down.
No, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. No, it's a little under 1 point. I know, it's a little under
I was
1.
not expecting 1.7.
It's a little under 1.2. That's what I was, I had the
hoping we
zero. I
found
had
some
the-
money somewhere. I wasn't gonna question it.
No, I had
just-
the zeros line. It's a little under 1.2, that's why.
Okay.
Peter?
When we present the budget at the town meeting, are they going to have the kindergarten edition separately from the school department, or will it be just part of the school department?
If we are looking
If we
to-
decide to fund it?
If we are looking to do that out of free cash, I believe that would be.
Well, there's different
warrant
formats.
article.
It could be just done as a part of the budget, where we could use free cash as part of the funding, the part of the motion to fund the budget, or it could be, that part of the program could just be funded separately as an article to supplement the budget. It could be done however people, as a matter of, I guess, it could be one way or the other.
Okay.
Could be done as whatever your choice would be.
Wouldn't it be school budget, it's part of school?
Because of using free cash for it, it's not part of the yearly operational budget.
Yep.
So it would be something that the positions that would be created would be brought into the yearly operational budget.
I don't know that that's necessarily, because the free cash is free cash, so it just kind of goes back into the.
Well, like I say, you could.
You'd have to ask for, that would have to be a special motion, or it could just be
Right.
worked out ahead of time with the school
Well, you
department and the selectmen as a policy.
Although it would be, you could just, increase the school budget by that amount,
I mean,
and the overall municipal budget, the motion would be, to raise and appropriate X amount, the funds to be
school-
provided as such, raise and appropriate X, amounts to be, transfer from free cash and all the other. So you could do it as part of the funding motion, and, again, or it could be a separate article, and after which it would become part of the school budget. So I think you have an option to do it one way or the other, depending on how you read the public mood on it. But obviously, it would have to be, before the warrant is solidified.
because they'd have to have an article, a separate article.
Yeah, so I mean.
Or it can just be in their budget.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It would be-
Yeah.
But again, then the funding motion becomes critical, because it would have to include the use of free cash in the motion to fund it, to fund the budget.
In your
One way or the other.
discussions so far, has that been discussed? Have you been leaning a specific way?
Well, we just presumed it would be part of the budget, if that's what everybody thinks, that's the direction people want to go in. We just assumed it'd be part of the budget.
That's fine.
Because as you know, once the funds are appropriated for the school department, I mean, it's irrelevant, because once they're under the school committee control, Whether they're in an article or they're in the budget, it's really
It
the
wouldn't
same
just be seen
thing.
as an increase to the school department's budget?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Once it, whether,
But then there wouldn't be a need for, would there still then be a need for the increase to the school department's budget is coming out of free cash? For that motion?
well,
It would just be a special line item transfer we would do that day to cover
well,
the budget increase, right?
exactly. You're just using free cash.
Where the money's coming
To-
from, but it
to-
wouldn't be a motion to, on town meeting floor, would it?
I'm sorry, Barbara, I'm mixed up here. I'm not sure the context of your question, because, like I said, assuming that, again, the Finance Committee, as you know, makes the initial motion on the budget. And if the Finance Committee chooses to recommend that, that the program, that the school budget include sufficient funding, then, and free cash be utilized to seed it, then free cash would simply be one of the funding sources for the overall budget article. And that would be it.
Right, the way I was looking at it was that would be, if that was the town manager and selectmen's intent, then that would be part of the school budget number, and in the, funding sources, free cash would be a funding source.
Right.
But it wouldn't be not a special, separate motion, is what I'm asking. So I guess I'm asking.
You mean
would
not
that
a
need to-
separate article?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
It'd be all part of the same.
exactly.
If it's in the school's budget, it doesn't need to then be a separate motion just for the,
Correct. It wouldn't have to be a separate article, right. So I guess my point is that there hasn't been a decision made. There simply hasn't been a decision made on
Well,
that.
when do the warrants close? Because that clock's gotta be running down, because the warrants have to be, 10 days before town
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah, well, again, there can be a warrant article drafted, but whether or not, it's,
So there's no particular need to do it separately.
there isn't a need, no.
It would be
That's
easier
really
just to do it as part of the whole budget and then,
It really
cite
would,
the-
it would be easier to do it as just part of the, because the public still has the same choice.
yeah,
The public has the same choice, whether it's a separate article or it's part of the budget.
and
it
then
doesn't
just cite
change-
free cash as part of the,
Exactly. It doesn't change,
part of the source.
doesn't change the decision,
Okay,
so.
that makes sense.
When is the warrant closing?
The 16th, I think, is the, and again, obviously, there's the budget article is on the warrant. That's, in my world, that is the warrant,
When's town meeting?
May 21st.
That'd be just,
16th of April. Or
Yes,
16th of
yes,
April, the
yes,
warrant
thank you.
closes.
Yes, correct.
And that's
Yeah.
less than 2 weeks.
Yes, yes, but again, this is,
So that determination needs to be made in the next 2 weeks if it's going to
If
be a
there's-
separate
if-
article or
yes,
if it's just going to be
yes,
part of
if-
the budget
that
article.
that is correct.
And the leaning right now is to have it just be part of the budget article.
Nobody has even, until now, the question hasn't even been posed or suggested that there would be a separate article to fund that program. So
I just wanted to make sure.
No, yeah,
Can I ask you a quick
And I was
question?
just interested because
Yeah.
we usually deal with
Yeah.
free cash
The overage-
aside from,
yeah, it's a good point.
aside from the overall
Good
budget.
point,
so.
yeah.
Overage on the snow, what do we at? Ish?
About 450.
450 plus 400, that's 8, to 1.1 in the bank.
More like 9.
Yeah, but offset by approximately $400,000 in the VOTEC
Gotcha.
savings.
So that's the thing that he talked about,
Yeah.
having less,
Yeah.
we just haven't seen the real number
Yeah,
yet.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
So we can't take that.
Yeah.
So that's what was confusing to me, that's why I asked you how much we have,
Yeah.
because if we got down to 200, then I thought, well, maybe they would think we
Yeah.
don't really have enough in the bank.
But that's not
Yep, I know.
stabilization.
Yeah,
That's not what we have in the bank. That's free cash, which
Yeah.
is.
Well, I think you're
Which is
talking
what-
figuratively in the bank. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, I didn't even know we
Right.
had a bank.
Yeah.
Free cash is what's in the checking account.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stabilization is what's in the
Stabilization is the
savings.
savings.
yeah, that's a good way of putting
I
it,
got you.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Not at all.
Further questions there?
Did it help Barbara forget her next question?
I guess,
No.
Trying hard.
who's gonna make the decision whether it's part of the budget? Who is that gonna fall?
Well,
Is that
the
something
bottom
you-
line is if the school committee doesn't submit an article, or if the finance committee doesn't submit an article, I don't know that anyone else would have a preference. Who else would have a preference if it's not the finance committee or the school committee?
Saying, like, if it's-
Citizen.
Well, yeah, but it's not their job to have a preference. It's either your job or the school
No,
committee's
no, no, I know, I'm
job
just
to have a
saying,
preference.
the warrant is the,
I mean, I think
articles
it's, you know,
I'm saying, it's up to us, we could probably
mean,
just put it to bed.
I don't have a
as to
preference.
How we're gonna move forward with
To
that.
me, it's, we'll put it this way, after town meeting takes action, it's irrelevant because the funds are under the control of the school committee one way or the other.
Right.
That's the end of it. So, to me, it's cleaner to have it just as part of the overall spending plan in the budget, once it's, you know.
If the answer is yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the reality is if, you know, town meeting chooses not to fund the program, they simply deduct $450,000 from the school budget on town meeting floor, and the same from
So that would,
Yep.
the revenue.
Got
That's,
it.
it's,
really, it would be a question of whether that discussion at town meeting happened
yes,
during the discussion of the overall budget, or if it
Yes.
happened separately.
yeah, how, yeah, exactly, so.
Sorry.
How do you wish
You
to?
lost me on that one just because
So-
we'll be discussing it.
At town meeting, we discuss things article by article.
Yes,
So if we're putting this in with the overall budget article, it would have to be discussed during the discussion of the overall budget, and any amendment to the budget at that point would need to be motioned at town meeting to be determined if we would make changes to it before it is approved by the town. If it's a separate article, it would either pass or not pass and be discussed on its own separate from the overall budget.
but usually because it's a budget item, it would be discussed around the.
Yes.
So in theory,
So
would actually
there's
have
kind
to-
of two sides to it.
We'd have to discuss that before we went to the budget, because it would have a direct correlation to the budget.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the warrant would have to be handled before the budget.
so when do we do that? I mean, do we talk about that today or tomorrow? I mean,
So we'll-
I
sorry.
think, given our meeting schedule, we're talking about it now.
Oh, all right.
so it's completely how you'd like to do it.
Uh,
We're happy to.
By
So can I-
the way, if people don't want to do it right now, I just don't understand when you're supposed to do it, so that's why I asked when we're supposed to do it.
Well, we'll be, this week, and obviously, and, would be, the next couple days is when, Dory and Sue Moquin, the town accountant, will be dealing with the bulk of putting the warrant together, et cetera. So now would be a good time to know what your preference is, actually, so.
I just as soon put it on the school budget and leave it go, as part of the overall budget.
Here, so wouldn't you put?
It would, this would be only one time.
This,
Oh, right, but then you
One
have
time.
no way, but then
so
they, okay,
the
but then
free
you
cash portion would be one time, but,
and then going forward
but
would
the
be.
positions that it brings in would be
Become a part of the budget.
a part of the
Yeah.
budget, so
You
it's,
said the positions?
Like
yes.
they-
Like
Yeah,
if you went
yeah,
to-
I just didn't see what you
Yeah.
said.
So, let's ask them. If we're, in our,
Mike's asking you something.
if we're gonna make an opinion on whether we handle this as a separate warrant, do we have to make a decision on that opinion as a motion?
I think we can give a sense of the,
Maybe
of
just
the.
give me a
So-
sense of the committee, and I'll just make sure we include a
So
warrant
what are,
article.
what are people's feelings?
Well, so I have other questions before we get to voting like that.
So before we vote, Barbara will ask more questions.
Not vote, but, right, before we
Before we
ask
set-
for a sense,
before we give
I
our
have some other,
opinions.
yeah, before I give my opinion, I'd like, so, I'm gonna set the school aside for a minute. What is the plan on how, you had talked about adding detectives halfway through the year?
and I just wanted to know how, because I'm looking at, that we wouldn't be putting anything into stabilization, so we're tight, we're not, you know.
Correct, yes.
But, so I want to know what's going to happen halfway through the year that's going to put us in a position to fund those, a detective. But I also want to know, so that's one question.
Yes, okay.
Sean Tyler tonight.
Try to.
So that's one question. The other would be, does this budget that the model that you're currently working on,
Yes.
does it include the seed money for full-day kindergarten? And if it does it also include picking up the 2 grant positions for the police department?
The answer is yes,
To which?
to both.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And is it balanced?
Didn't we already?
Well, yes. If it wasn't balanced, it wouldn't
We
matter.
wouldn't be here.
Yeah,
We already picked up the grant positions, no?
the older budget even had the grant.
Yeah, the
positions
first one,
already
that's,
built in.
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
No, and,
Yes.
right, I just want to make sure that,
That
could
would-
have.
That
No,
this-
right.
I didn't want to make sure that hasn't changed.
And to the first
And
question,
How then?
Before I,
And
yeah.
the-
The first question, it's not like something's gonna happen halfway through the year. The goal would be to have enough money in the budget to effectively fund
Half of the.
for, half a fiscal year's worth, so that.
Have enough money left over in this current budget that we're working on to then, put that aside for halfway through the
Well, no,
year, is it?
because funds get closed out at the end of the
Right.
fiscal year. But the point is essentially that, half, to be able to fund a half a year's worth, so that halfway through next fiscal year, the chief would be able to start filling detective positions. That would be the goal, because, and as it happens, it takes time to fill positions anyway.
No, I
It takes
know.
a lot of time.
I'm just wondering how we financially would,
That would be
what
the
the
goal.
financial avenue to reach that goal would be.
So I think,
Yeah.
let me jump in for a second. I think that what Rick is saying is that in the model of the budget that is being worked on right now, to keep things balanced and look at that, we have the ability to add about half of the salary needed to add the detectives, but
Right.
not the
No,
entire.
right. I'm not comfortable going the
year.
whole way.
Not the entire year, so if we added them halfway
Right.
into the year, we would.
Well, that's
have-
what, so that's what I was asking. You would have that, you have
Be too risky to.
finances for that avenue halfway through the year
Yeah.
with this budget model that we're working on.
That,
Right,
yes.
but it's not that halfway through the year we would get that money that would.
No,
it's
that's what I just said.
Yes, right,
That-
okay.
Earlier you had
So
said.
right now,
What.
the budget
what
model
would
that
make
we're
that
working on
happen.
right now,
Yeah,
that you
we've
have that
got-
money.
That the finance group has been working with for, yeah.
right,
yes,
but
yes.
that money is,
Yeah. As long as
you
keep-
have enough for a half
Yes,
the year
right, that
to
we-
do it.
Right,
You
initially,
just
our
wouldn't-
the goal was that FY '20 was looking like the year that we would be looking at detectives, that absorbing the grant-funded positions in FY '19 and then looking towards FY '20. But because we were, our fixed costs, we were a little bit more conservative, and we were really maybe a little hyper-conservative in some, like, new growth projections that we, early on in our budget process, in our revenue estimates, that, okay, we might be able to do more in FY '20 than we had thought. So maybe earlier in the fiscal, the FY '19, we can start working towards that goal, keeping in mind that was, and has been for several years since I've been here, the number one staffing priority of the Board of Selectmen. So that's one of the
That's what-
reasons
So
why
if
I'd
I
like to.
paint a picture right now, right, I could say that with the budget that we're looking at, without putting money into stabilization, we could fund
Yeah,
the seed money for full-day kindergarten.
keeps raining.
We're able to
Didn't
We're
say the
able
word.
to pick up the 2 granted positions, the school resource officers.
Correct.
For the police department.
Correct.
And halfway through the fiscal year, we will be able to add detectives
That's-
for the second half of the year to the police department.
And
Yes,
pay snow
That's-
removal.
yes, I'm sorry?
And pay snow removal.
Is that-
Yes, pay, yeah, Yeah,
So my question is, are we still talking about that half a year? Are we talking about 2 detectives?
that's, yes.
So-
For half, yes, correct.
Going back to the question I asked Chief Majensky is, does it have to be 2? Can it be 1 to get us a detective? And he said 1 was okay. Is it a possibility, if we get further in this process, to maybe only make it 1 position for this
For the
fiscal year
entire
for the half a year?
Well, that would be.
If it starts getting really tight.
That would be the chief's that would, to me, obviously I have to leave that up to the chief, to what he thinks is best for his needs. You know, I mean, you've heard him discuss, you know, why 2 is better than 1, but if 1 for a full fiscal year versus, but the attitude was, he's described, I think, to all of us, and certainly to me, that, you know, maybe for him, getting 1 on board earlier, and then maybe a second one in FY '20, that's his decision. And maybe that's a conversation for another day, but
But you would put that money in the
but-
police department budget
Yes.
as
Yes.
half of what would,
But part of the challenge for the chief, and he's got, you know, vacancies now, he's obviously filling and getting, you know, people, names on the list, and getting people in, you know, available academies, and getting them trained and on the street. That takes sufficient time as it is, so whatever would work best for the chief, whether it's, you know, a position filled for a full year, or looking at filling 2 towards the end, you know, latter half of next fiscal year, I'd have to leave that to his, whatever works best for him, Mike.
I mean, I think
You
that's
know.
just something to keep in the back of our
Yeah.
heads, that
No,
maybe
we asked
if
him
we
that,
need
yeah.
to,
That would be for his,
If
whatever.
we needed to drop it to 1.
if we need to bring him in and
at
say-
halfway
But,
through the season.
but financially,
Better than none.
financially, that would, but that's, you know.
so
the,
without having the police budget right in
the
front of me
model,
though,
That's, we're looking at.
that the,
You know, but keeping in mind that, but the overall staffing goal would be, you know, getting those 2 bodies would really be, would at least, after that, as we take a pause, and that's the so-called high water staffing mark of the police department, you know, from
That's the
approximately
long-term
15,
goal.
20 years ago. And then it's, you know, okay, take a breath and see where the department needs to go from there.
Is there any way to have another conversation with him, to get him in here? I mean, I know it stinks to have people here till 10 o'clock at night, but I know we have a lot of stuff, not today, but on another night, to sort of discuss more of the, because we asked him, I think I asked him if 1 would be okay, and he said yes.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you could, but, you know,
Yep.
I'm the liaison.
One
And,
thing at a
he
time,
would
yeah.
come
I'm
in,
saying
and
it is
sometimes it's better
because-
to get the information from, especially where we're talking about budget, I can ask.
that might be a
and-
discussion.
yeah,
I believe his 1 is better than none.
one's better than.
That's what he was saying. If I can't have 2, I want 1.
Yeah,
Yep, yeah.
And so I think that's where he's at.
Well, and then in 20, we don't have these school expenditures.
Exactly.
Supposedly because sort of there's a payback or whatever, that we don't know exactly how much it is, but
We
You'll
like to
have-
think
you'll have
that,
school
but
expenditures,
there'll be
right.
No,
other
on
stuff.
that- on that particular one is.
No,
what
but
I'm
it'll be
saying.
something else, because just, things get outdated, or we don't know what the contract will be
Yeah,
either.
so-
They're trying to settle a contract, so they're in the 3rd year of this is the end of their contract, so we don't know what that's gonna end up looking like.
Yep.
You also have this year in the school department's budget, a certain amount for retirement offsets. That doesn't usually happen, each, you know what I mean, that
We
kinda
don't
comes in
usually have
waves, and then
retired.
some years it's just like dribs and drabs of retirement offset. Some years you have a good number for retirement offset, and then next year you might not have much to offset, and then you gotta make that up somewhere.
Does it
Next
have
year
to be
you could
done,
have-
does it have to be done by April, whatever it is? Can something be added after that, or does this timeline have to happen?
no, it needs to happen, the planning has to happen.
But we need to,
It can't be chaotic, it's gotta be, you know,
well,
it's gotta
we
be
need
chaotic.
The
to,
reason I'm saying chaos, I don't wanna, I'm not talking about that, I just mean more like, if it decides yes or no, whatever it is, can somebody go back on that a year later if,
Back on,
whatever.
wait, back on what specifically, Greg, what are we talking about?
On whether either funding the kindergarten thing or.
No, it's a-
Or the police, that's what I'm asking.
No.
well, once you,
Once
Once
it's
you make
added.
a decision, it's going
Well,
forward.
once we're into it, and that's why, you know, the issue came up recently, and I won't get into how, when, and where, but, about why we're not doing enough to fund our police department. And you know, the reality is this department, the town has made decisions in the last half a dozen plus years, you know, maybe last 10 years to rebuild its fire services and made decisions that it, you know, it wanted to have a certain level of service in other departments, whether it's, you know, whether it's at COA or whether it's, you know,
Trash.
you know, trash, or whatever the case is, and,
Schools, wherever.
you know, whatever the case might be, and, you know, so, you know, we don't go back and tell people they were wrong. You know, you try to methodically build the other services the best you can, you know what I mean? So, if you hit financial crises, and usually that's because of major economic downturns.
Which we did.
Or major cuts in state aid, well, that's why our police department we're still rebuilding. Well, then you have to do what you have to do, you know, but you don't go back a year or two and say, well, you know what, we're gonna cut what the public just decided a year or two ago they wanted. That's not good faith. It's just
But
not good faith.
After April 10th, we can still, we can change our motion, you know, the warrant itself, the warrant itself closes on not April 10th, April 16th. We try to post our recommendations, what we as a group, the finance committee, what we as a group decide. We like to get those in the warrant.
Yep.
But there may be some that we don't have enough information for,
Yeah,
and we have to do it later. And as long as we're posting them, they might not make it, all of our recommendations might not make it on the actual warrant.
Sure.
But as long as we post them 10 days before, or is it 10
it's 10
business, no,
No, it's 10
10
days before.
full days before town meeting,
by
then
the
we can
12th of-
be debating that.
It was
We
basically
tried.
more of a question of, can this stuff, can we change this stuff? And
After April 6th, I mean, after the
exactly,
warrant
because of things
closes.
that could possibly happen that are out of everybody's control. I mean,
There are times that things get
change.
changed a
Yeah.
half an hour before town
Yeah,
meeting.
you guys know that, so
But
they-
you know
Contracts that
what? That's
come
not
in,
the stuff,
things
you
of
know.
that sort.
No, we try not to do that, but but for somebody that's new,
Yeah,
that's
no,
important
Yeah, I
information that you should
understand.
know that,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, things can change up to the last minute. And often, we don't have, we might not have for the full information on an article or two, or they may be waiting to settle
You might be a contract or something.
a
yeah,
contract,
Yes.
or there
Typically,
might
we're
be.
not making
we might
major
not have all
changes to
the-
budget at the last minute.
Yes, yeah, but budgetary issues and stuff, you want those solidified.
Yes.
Even if you have to wait to another date and time, you want budget stuff solidified, you know. So, but I will get you an updated model, and the next time we talk, maybe we can, but everything you've said, I think, Barbara, you, again, hitting all the right points here, obviously. Yes, we're trying to do a lot, but I'm not comfortable, you know, trying to get additional public safety positions in for a full year. And again, the chief's well aware of it.
No,
and-
I
and he's
just
got
wanna-
his hands full.
I just
So-
want to know what we're looking at. I don't like to
he's-
have one
Yeah.
issue or department pitted
No.
against the other.
Oh, my goodness.
So I
And
don't
like
want
I
it to-
said, to you
That's why-
earlier, and it's important for you to know that, you know, our public safety officials and DPW director, you know, and again, I don't want to eat these words, they're the first to say that, you know, it's time to, you know, we don't want to be on the wrong side of history with kindergarten. If this is where, you know, you know,
Well, I mean, and part of the building the school was saying that
Yeah.
now we have room, and I was like, oh, great,
yeah.
you know, okay, we're gonna have a new
Yes.
high school, we're gonna have free kindergarten, Abington,
Yes.
really, and now to say,
Yeah.
I'm still not gonna fund it, still not gonna fund it, it doesn't
Yeah.
make me
yeah.
super happy that
I
we
know.
built this new school and increased our taxes, which I
Sure.
was all for,
Yes.
but I feel like you gotta follow through a little.
Yeah, and
it's-
that raises a good point.
yeah.
It's something that could become state mandated.
Right, and then we don't have the money, and
So-
then.
I didn't even know it wasn't state mandated, that's why
Half is.
Well,
state
it'll be a
mandated.
state mandate, and a mandate they won't fund.
Not
Right.
fund.
We're much better to start,
To-
the
to
sooner,
be
the
able to
absolute
do it
better,
And prepare for it. and
in my
plan for it.
You
opinion.
know, and it's one of those situations that, you know, it's definitely a leap of faith that, you know, that it's gonna keep us up at night, because if, you know, inevitably, we don't know when it's gonna be, but there's going to be, whether it's in 2, 3, 5, 10, hopefully 50, hopefully I'll be retired, there's gonna be another significant economic downturn and whether or not the state's going to pick up, you know, the state aid burden, and it's going to be a struggle, you know. But what do you do?
Which is why we want to protect that
Well,
bond rating and that stabilization.
But what do you do? Do you not move forward, though? Do you not?
Oh, no,
move forward?
I would never say that. I just
know.
want to make sure
That's the
that
problem.
we're not
So-
like, that I don't want the argument to be that we're funding all-day kindergarten instead of. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I had a accurate picture of how you were planning to
So-
halfway through fund that.
Yeah, well, again, that's why I'm not comfortable with a full year. I mean, obviously, we went in, would have loved to have come into this budget process thinking, okay, this is the year we're gonna bring back.
I just wanted to know that there was an avenue.
Yeah,
And-
trying to be moving forward, but with a little more caution. And again, Chief Majewski's completely on board with the caution.
So,
Caution.
does that answer your question
All of them.
whether
Don't
to
get
have
used
it
to
as a
it.
separate article or as part of the budget? So do we have opinions on part of the budget article or a separate article? Anyone feel strongly one way or the other?
Make it part of the budget, or, you know, full budget. Keeps
agree.
it simple.
Yeah,
Keeps
Wait a
it
minute
simple.
now, I don't want everybody to answer at once, because I have to make a note on that, so.
Your guidance
let me
tonight is
kinda-
very
So it's a
kind.
sense of the
So
meeting.
starting with Peter,
So,
full budget.
who's
Full
looking for a
budget.
separate article? That would be easier to do it that way.
Is anyone looking to have it as a separate article? No. There's-
Okay.
Okay.
No,
So
that's
that's-
fine, no, thank you.
So-
We don't have to go around the whole
I
time.
will let the real powers that
Sense of
be, that being Dory, know
Yes.
that tomorrow.
All right.
Thank
Are we
you.
ready to move to our reserve fund transfer request?
Yes.
And just, are we saying yes to the police thing at this point, or not?
The
We're
police
not-
thing is a
that's
separate
Separate.
discussion.
Yeah.
Separate issue.
Got it.
Yeah.
I just wanted, I didn't know if that was right now.
Separate discussion. So we have a reserve fund transfer for the newer people. Every year as part of the budget, we have a reserve fund. In the past budget, it was $30,000. And that's in case we have line items that run out of money and there's something that we need. We discussed when the library was here, when their HVAC system kicked the bucket and we had to pick that up. So we have request to be made. Request is hereby made for the following transfer from the reserve fund in accordance with chapter 40 to be transferred to the selectmen purchase of services, $6,000. And
Shall I? This is
Yes.
for the professional services we engaged for the appraisal of the easement that runs next to the COA and the MBTA railroad tracks that leads to the property behind the COA that is owned by a private developer. That private developer is seeking to access that for the installation of utilities. For him, he's building a senior development back there.
is this the development that was brought, the potential
That is-
development that was brought before us last year?
Yes, and it went to town meeting. The town can't simply, though, just give a private developer an easement. That is something that under state law has to be procured. And we don't know what our obligation is from a procurement standpoint, because anything over a certain value has to go through different types of procurement processes. Well, we had to engage the services of a professional to know what the threshold would be. So we went through, and Mr. Pistorino provided us with an appropriate professional to provide those services, and we need to pay the gentleman, so.
So we hadn't anticipated this?
Yes, yes. Well, he also had to himself engage the services of a civil engineer to provide him with some information himself in order to provide, for him to do his job properly, so.
We didn't know that we had to survey the land in order to,
Well, no, he needed some information on, part of the question has to do with how much, some of the value has to do with how much savings this, the developer would have versus bringing in utilities from another point, so it has to do with, you know, flow and saving pump elevations, and so.
I'm just more asking
so
why
he
it
had
was
done-
unforeseen.
So it also, well, because we didn't know last year
Okay.
that we were gonna need an appraisal.
Would-
Because whether you're not, yeah, we simply didn't know. This was a petition article last year's town meeting, so so some, we
pass.
just didn't know, so. Oh.
Just don't understand why we didn't make the developer pay for it.
Well, trust me, if this goes forward, the cost, whatever the developer ends up paying the town will be, this cost will be recovered in that, trust me.
Okay.
How much is in our reserve?
$30,000.
We have not spent any of
Okay.
the reserve fund this year.
All right.
So is the reserve fund like a rainy day fund?
Correct.
Yes.
No, well, it's
It's-
like,
It's like,
usually
It's-
for unforeseen,
yes.
like something
right,
happens.
so like a rainy day fund,
Correct.
like, oh, my roof is leaking down, you need a new
Finance
roof, it's
Committee's rainy
extra
day fund,
safe.
yes.
Yeah, like a rainy
But
day.
it's- It's,
So-
yeah,
This was an
Yeah.
easement.
it's, but it's not the town's, like, it's
Right.
this
it's
committee's.
Our committee.
Yeah.
I got 3 conversations going and I can't hear one of them.
So this was,
Sorry.
so we, can somebody just explain real fast, I don't wanna keep everybody here. Easement?
Yes,
So-
there's an easement that runs next to the senior center down on Summer Street.
Yeah.
And-
Piece of land.
And a developer who owns a piece of land behind that had a petition got a petition article, went to town meeting last year, and forgetting all the details, and asked town meeting to essentially give him access to that easement, so he could put utilities in there to have access to the back, rear of that for his property. Well, that's all fine and good, but town meeting doesn't have the authority to just do that.
Yep.
That has to come through the Board of Selectmen, and the selectmen have the authority and the responsibility to make sure that they get proper, what's the word, value for the town. Well, in order to get proper value for the town and actually decide if they even want to do it, we have to know what the value of that easement would be.
Gotcha.
So,
So in order for us to charge, we needed somebody to tell us what it's worth.
correct,
Got it.
correct. So,
I'm
but
sorry.
we don't have the money in our budget, in the selectmen's budget, to get proper professional services.
Yep.
Do you need a motion for that?
Yes. Further discussion? So a motion to approve.
Approve.
Second.
Motion to approve the transfer and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? It was unanimous.
What if we didn't approve it?
Wouldn't get paid.
This poor gentleman's out of luck.
Our credit rating would go. Our bond rating would go.
We put a lien on the easement.
Would be a town meeting. We already own it.
Isn't it actually, it's not an easement yet, he wants to make it one?
Well, he'd like an easement, that's correct, Lisa. That's actually correct. He'd like an easement from
So
the
it's
town.
our land, but he
That's
was like.
actually correct, yes. Good point. Good point. That's the correct
It's
Okay.
already,
language.
yeah,
But
they have a right of way.
But they have a right of way on
Right,
my
yeah.
property.
He wants to make
Yeah.
it one.
Matt, why don't you
Yeah,
sign
but
all
yeah,
this
so
in
the
town
town
for the
does not
records and I'll give Rick
Right.
this copy
Yeah.
now.
Well, that's efficient.
For a house, I'm not forgetting about it, and I know where
And
this
it's
is.
like, what's the distance?
I was gonna say it.
Yeah, okay.
Got completely stopped. I said,
He
"Geez,
would
it
pay
doesn't-
for
just
the
doesn't
rights.
say
He
it."
needs a new battery,
Yeah, so the.
But it's still.
and I don't think it's.
So, moving along, do we have
Thank
any
you.
liaison reports?
Yep.
Peter?
As was mentioned, aforementioned here, we had a school building committee meeting. Just so you know, we're still $2.2 million under budget for the whole project. They did approve a quote for 1,100 laptops, as we've talked about, and 3 years of maintenance, $537 per unit, and total of $563,939 for the whole enchilada. And the solar panels, long story short, will be up and running probably the 1st of May.
Peter, will you explain about how the 2.2 isn't actual we don't have leftover, it's not leftover.
It's
money
not been
that we
committed.
don't have to borrow.
No,
So can we
it's
not
money
spend
that,
it?
it's money in the budget that has not been committed.
So then we would owe less money on that bond from last year if we don't spend that rest of it.
Correct.
Right? So we could pay it off sooner,
In theory.
in theory.
The 3-year thing,
Yeah,
was that all in one chunk, or is that a yearly cost?
no, it's all part of this, all part of the
So
deal.
the 530-something is the 3-year thing, is it?
Cost of the laptop.
560,000 and change is the total price, period.
And after the 3 years, is there a cost of, we know that it's gonna be X amount for the service thing that we're gonna have to keep doing?
Well, that's why we want that tech guy, so that we don't need
Yes.
the service
I gotcha.
thing anymore.
They did, you know, they just got a 3-year maintenance and that was it.
Yeah.
So
I think that was,
probably by then they'll be totally obsolete anyway.
Get a service agreement.
right, and then it's, yeah, but I think, and then the idea was to have the tech to like,
Yes.
whatever.
Make sure that they last longer. than
Right,
that.
yeah.
Other liaison reports? There were no correspondence at this point. And we do have meeting minutes to review.
And yes, I changed the 2014
14.
again. I don't know why I'm stuck on that.
We have meeting minutes from our March 28th, 2014 meeting.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 20, 2018.
Amended to say such.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the meeting minutes? Deb had a lot to go over from that meeting, and she did a very good job of putting the important information into these minutes. Thank you, Deb. Any discussion? No? All those in favor of approving the minutes? All those opposed? So the only other thing on the agenda, our next meeting is scheduled for April 18th. As we discussed, the warrant will be closing before then. Do we feel that we should or need to meet in any capacity next week before that closes to discuss, or do we feel we are okay to wait until the 18th when our next department heads are in? Is there anyone that feels we should meet next week?
I just want to point out for anyone that has children, that that would be the April vacation week, so I don't know if people, you might want to check and make sure we're going to get a quorum.
Next week or the 18th?
The 18th.
18th.
I will not be here. Somebody will be. That is my 25th wedding anniversary.
So he will definitely.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
You would be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I was
Especially
just gonna
since
say,
we
you
had,
could start a whole.
especially since we had you here on Valentine's
Last of
Day.
everything.
We have no departments scheduled for the
For
11th?
the 11th, there are no departments scheduled.
Are there any departments that we could move up from the
I will
18th to the
double
11th?
check, I will double check
If we
when I
think that
last
the 18th is
spoke
gonna
with
be an issue.
Dory, there
Well,
was,
does anyone here have an issue with the
Well, that's,
18th?
yeah, that's.
I mean, I have kids, but they're in daycare, so we, not an issue.
I will be here.
They're on their own, they go.
Wait, what time?
So it's at night, I just didn't know, because sometimes people plan vacation on April vacation and actually go away. There's
Some
that
people
do
do
that.
go away during
They
April
actually go
vacation.
away on
Yes.
vacation.
Yeah, no, we don't observe April vacation in my household yet.
So we won't have trouble getting.
So I will still check with Dory about moving people from the 18th to the 11th, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, if, as long as the 18th
It's not gonna be a problem for, I don't
So it
mind
doesn't
taking, I'm
work.
not complaining about taking next week off.
Okay.
I just wanted to make the point that, you know, if everybody was going to Aruba and I was gonna be the only one here.
Won't be the only.
Only Rick is
So
going
we
to
make
Aruba.
sure we take Barbara to Aruba and then we don't have to.
Disney College, no.
What time is it?
All right.
That clock stopped.
Anyone else have anything else? Any discussions, any motions?
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Your motion to adjourn,
Second.
the second,
Give it to
Mike
Mike.
and then Barbara.
I just
Any discussion?
says,
All those in favor of adjourning? Those opposed, abstaining, the ayes have it, we are adjourned. I kept looking at that clock thinking that it's not 9.
it's just, it needs a new battery.
All sense of,